Every day, millions of containers transport goods around the world. It seems like these metal boxes are manufactured by dozens of countries. After all, there is nothing complicated about their construction. But in reality, the situation is quite different. Almost 95% of all maritime containers in the world are produced by a single country, China. And this creates an unexpected problem. Paralyzing Chinese factories for just a few months during the pandemic was enough to cause a catastrophic shortage of containers. Rental prices skyrocketed, thousands of ships were stranded in ports, and the cost of transporting goods soared worldwide. Can't other countries manufacture these same metal boxes? And how did it happen that practically all global trade today depends on a few Chinese factories? Today we will understand why almost all containers are manufactured precisely in China, how this country dominated an entire sector, and why to this day almost no one can repeat its success. On April 26, 1956, a strange ship called the Ideal X set sail from the port of New York. On its deck, there were ordinary cargo trailers without wheels. Many passers-by on the pier laughed and tapped their fingers against their temples. None of them realized that at that exact moment, the world as they knew it was crumbling forever. Former American truck driver Malcolm McLean invented something simple that completely changed the planet's economy. He packed diverse cargo into standardized steel boxes. Until then, port crews manually loaded ships for whole weeks. People carried 3-ton sacks, barrels, and wooden crates. McLean reduced this time to a few hours. The cost of port loading immediately dropped 36-fold. It was a true shock to the market. The new system instantly erased physical borders between continents. A turbulent era of global trade was beginning. But that's where the main paradox of this story arose. This standard was conceived, patented, and tested for the first time in the United States of America. However, today American companies produce practically none of this volume. The inventing country instantly lost control over its main technological creation. Why did this happen? It all started with fierce resistance within the country itself. As soon as the new containers began to take over the ports en masse, labor unions organized a true revolt against shipowners. Thousands of longshoremen in New York and London took to the streets in violent protests. They understood perfectly well that these iron boxes were taking their jobs. Large-scale strikes began. Shipowners were losing millions of dollars a week due to forced ship stoppages. To calm the enraged population, companies had to drastically increase the salaries of the port workers who remained active. And this decision became a fatal step for the local industry. The production cost of the containers themselves in Western factories began to grow exponentially. Factory workers demanded more and more money for each shift. Major steel mills also increased the prices of rolled steel products. Very soon, manufacturing containers in the United States or Europe became economically unfeasible. Assembling a single iron box became more expensive for owners than the profit from its resale. The situation became similar to baking bread, where the flour and the baker's labor cost more than the bread itself. The West hit a dead end, and container production rapidly began to migrate to Asia. Over time, it was China that completely dominated this sector, turning the assembly of these boxes into a fully automated process and completely driving out competitors with its prices. But the issue wasn't just about cheap labor. There is a secret element without which the steel would turn into rusted dust right after the first storm. And this component is entirely controlled by just one point on the map. Imagine a huge cargo ship right in the middle of a raging Pacific Ocean. Waves the height of a 3-story building crash against the hull with monstrous force. The scorching salt mist corrodes the coating. If we left an ordinary piece of iron on that deck, it would be rusted in a few weeks and turn into dust in 2 years. The ocean literally devours metal, but maritime containers sail the planet's dangerous routes for decades and do not completely rot away. How does an ordinary box resist this brutal attack of nature? The secret of this resistance lies in the material. It's not ordinary iron. Containers are manufactured with a special weather-resistant alloy called Corten Steel. Back in the first half of the last century, American engineers from the U.S. Steel Corporation were looking for a composition that didn't need to be painted for moisture protection. They conducted hundreds of laboratory tests and found the formula. Experts added a rigorously calibrated amount of copper, chromium, nickel, and phosphorus to the liquid metal. The The physics behind this alloy is surprising. Ordinary rust is porous. It easily allows water and oxygen to penetrate, gradually destroying the structure. Corten steel works differently. When salt water hits this box, the metal also begins to oxidize, but instead of deteriorating, a superdense film instantly forms on the surface of the wall. It hermetically seals the pores and totally blocks air access to the inner layers. In simpler terms, the alloy creates an eternal armor by itself, preventing further deterioration. In the history of navigation, there are known cases where salt-polished boxes were swept off a ship by a storm. They drifted for months in the open sea, like steel buoys, fully maintaining their watertightness and protecting the cargo inside. It would seem that one could just take the formula and start production in any country in the world, but that is exactly where Western metallurgists fell into an inescapable trap. To smelt Corten steel on a large scale, enormous volumes of energy and extremely powerful blast furnaces are required. The addition of just 1 extra gram of phosphorus would turn a gigantic batch of this expensive alloy into fragile, useless glass. Competitors simply didn't risk investing billions of dollars in such finicky technologies. Chinese corporations, over the past 2 decades, conducted a grand and discreet operation. They built next-generation metallurgical giants on their territory and acquired processing rights for rare components worldwide. Today, no company in Europe or the United States is capable of supplying so much alloy at a low price. The West ran out of raw materials, but even if this steel were brought to a Western factory for free, it would go bankrupt. What is happening? Imagine you buy a full-price plane ticket for a completely empty passenger seat. It sounds crazy, but this is exactly the financial mistake logistics companies make when they are forced to transport empty maritime containers. An iron box weighs almost 4 tons. It takes up a huge amount of space on the deck of a transatlantic ship. And most importantly, the ship uses exactly the same amount of expensive fuel to transport it as it does to transport a container completely full of goods. Transporting air across the ocean is a guaranteed financial failure for any business. It was precisely this unforgiving law of logistics that put the rest of the world in a dead-end trap. For a long time, foreign entrepreneurs thought they could simply build factories in their own countries and successfully compete with Asia, but they soon understood a simple truth. It's not enough to just smelt good steel and weld a box together. The container must be manufactured exactly where it will be filled with real goods at that very moment. Chinese strategists foresaw this move back at the end of the last century, creating a state-owned giant called CMC. They completely abandoned the idea of building factories somewhere in the interior of the country. Instead, they built gigantic automated industrial clusters right next to the piers of the largest maritime terminals in Shanghai and Shenzhen. The assembly process there was taken to absolute automation. Look inside this assembly line. A new container comes off the production line, gets painted with fresh paint, crosses the factory gate, and goes straight to the neighboring loading terminal. There it is immediately loaded with household electronics, clothes, or new machinery. From the first second of its life, this box begins to generate profit, fully recovering the costs of its manufacture. Now, look at foreign competitors. If a hypothetical factory in Europe or the United States assembled a similar container, there simply wouldn't be anything to fill it with locally. The main product factories are on the other side of the world. Companies would be forced to send a new, empty box across the ocean to Asia, incurring colossal losses. A vicious cycle emerged in this sector. China won not only because it had cheap labor. It trapped the planet in a system where, in a single point, the production of an exclusive metal, the automated assembly of packaging, and millions of tons of finished goods converged. No other economy has the capacity to repeat such a concentration of resources on the coast. This perfect chain functioned flawlessly for many years, resembling an ideal clockwork mechanism. The whole world trade got used to the fact that containers are always in the right place and strictly on time. A few years ago, the planet unexpectedly faced the phenomenon of ghost containers. A global failure in logistics routes almost paralyzed world trade. Imagine gigantic mountains of steel, the height of a 7-story building, erected in the middle of American highways. In the year 2020, the world faced a logistical paradox. On one side of the planet, ports were suffocating with an excess of containers, while on the other end, factories were paralyzed because there was no way to pack the goods. It was the greatest systemic deadlock in history, which almost brought world trade to a standstill. It all started during the period of global quarantine restrictions. Millions of people stayed at home and began mass ordering home appliances, furniture, and gym equipment over the internet. The flow of cargo from China flooded the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach like a tidal wave. Due to sanitary regulations, port services and truck drivers simply didn't show up for work. Huge ships sat anchored for weeks, forming lines on the horizon. On some days, up to 100 large merchant ships were stuck simultaneously off the coast of California. When the containers were unloaded on land, there was no one to transport them further. The steel boxes were stacked on top of each other directly at the terminals and in empty parking lots. Within a few months, millions of empty containers piled up in the United States and Europe. The system turned into a giant traffic jam, blocking itself. At the same time, true panic began on the Asian coast. Chinese factories were operating at full capacity, but their warehouses were bursting with inventory. There was nowhere left to send the production. A viral rumor instantly spread on social media. Supposedly, Beijing was intentionally buying up empty boxes all over the world and storing them in secret airfields to completely paralyze Western industry. But the economic reality turned out to be much more prosaic than any conspiracy theory. The entire chain collided with the harsh mathematics of maritime transport. The rental cost of a standard box skyrocketed from the usual amounts to astronomical figures. Sending a huge, empty ship back to China just to return used packaging was a financial disaster. A voyage with an empty hold consumed millions of dollars worth of fuel. It turned out to be much more profitable and faster to simply order new containers directly on the Chinese coast. But at that moment, the world realized the full gravity of this trap. Only one country was capable of manufacturing new containers in the required quantities. Chinese companies received an avalanche of orders and began working 24 hours a day. Now they were the ones deciding which brands received the scarce material first. The steel box turned into a powerful tool for global control. To escape this monopoly, Western corporations decided to urgently put their own factories into operation, but they immediately ran into the deadlock created by their own environmental laws. Imagine a strong, suffocating smell capable of paralyzing the operation of a huge factory in a second. It is a dense chemical mist that makes the eyes water instantly. This was exactly the barrier Western companies faced when trying to resume production of the steel boxes. Assembling the metal structure is just the tip of the iceberg. The main technological difficulty and the darkest secret of this industry have always been hidden in the final painting stage. Every few seconds, a ready, multi-ton box comes off the production line. A thick protective layer is applied to the surface. For decades, factories used cheap solvent-based varnishes, releasing millions of cubic meters of toxic compounds into the atmosphere. For this reason, inspectors in Europe and the United States imposed restrictions. Operating such facilities in these countries is punished with astronomical fines. Western laws effectively blocked their own heavy industry. And that is when Asian manufacturers pulled off a maneuver.